What are the country's top CEOs doing to build extraordinary teams and cultures who thrive even during a pandemic? You're about to take a deep dive into the minds of wildly successful C-suite leaders who are evolving the way that we work in the 21st century. Welcome to this special edition of How to Be Mesmerizing. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and we have another extraordinary CEO leader in the house. Pat Mancuso is with us. Pat, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. So Pat is an extraordinary human being, and we have a lot of similarities in how we think about people and how we care about people and help people to take their results and productivity and life happiness to the next level. So let me brag on Pat just for a few minutes here. He's CEO of Mancuso Consulting Group, and he's been an entrepreneur his whole life, creating all kinds of high-level businesses. And then, of course, one of the things that is made him kind of a star in the real estate world is he worked with Keller Williams Real Estate, and his brokerage firm grew to almost over 800 agents and nearly $1 billion in sales volume in less than 4 years, which is extraordinary. So he knows how to scale a business, build a culture. He's facilitated over 30,000 one-on-one coaching and consulting sessions, which you learn so much about human behavior from doing that. And of course, he hosts the very popular Success Ascent podcast, which I've had the honor of being on. So Pat, let's jump right in.
Oh, thanks so much, Tim. I'm excited. Let's get going.
So what are some of the key ingredients that you would say has made you successful over the years?
Well, Tim, success over the years, that's a great way to put it. As you know, success is a journey, right? It's not a destination. And over the years, there's been setbacks, there's been challenges, there's been ceilings. I want to go back and address something that you said, because I always want to make sure the record is clear, if you may. So we built an amazing company when we first launched our Keller Williams franchises, and we went from 11 agents day one to 800 agents in just short of 5 years. And we had $1 billion in sales revenue and, multi-millions in profit. And, as far as the opportunities, and it wasn't just a real estate company. We built a mortgage company, a title company. And the bottom line is we had great opportunity, and we also had some challenges that came along with that. And so even though we had $1 billion and nearly $1 billion in sales revenue, and we were making money, there was things that we foundationally, structurally could have done differently. And there was so many things to learn from that. So I would answer your question this way, is that it's not about the success. It's about the failures. It's about the setbacks. And the more setbacks you have, the more learning opportunity that you have. It's kind of a blind spot for a lot of people, because many don't want to fail. They look at failure as something that's bad or negative, and highly successful people, it's what I've learned, they love to fail. They embrace it. They say, bring it on, because that's where their biggest opportunities. People don't go, here's what I learned from success. You usually hear from people what they learned from their failures. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is that for a long, long time, I felt like I was in an environment that really didn't foster the entrepreneurial growth, didn't foster the entrepreneurial spirit, even though we were I was part of a very successful organization when I started in real estate back in 1987. What I experienced was way different when I came and started being a part of Keller Williams. It was more of, I really was an entrepreneur, and I wasn't taught how to be an entrepreneur in the beginning. And one of the things that I learned very early at KW was my, let's say, lack of contentment. And what I mean by that was, I always want to challenge the status quo. I always think there's a better way to do something. And with that, that's actually one of the things from a coaching and consulting perspective that people really embrace in working with me, is that I'm not ready to accept average. By the way, I don't accept average for me, and I'm not going to accept average for anybody that's around me. So I think those are some of the two biggest things, at least initially, in response to your question.
I love that. I love that. So that's very deep wisdom. And you're right. When people talk about what they learned, they're not usually referring to the successes, but what knocked them down and how they were able to get back up and pivot and shift. Seth Godin told me once, he said that failure is highly underrated, that we should be striving for it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I look back at some of our setbacks, there's so many things that I've learned that, we've applied moving forward, and we haven't made some of the same mistakes. And then that allows me to then coach and consult with the people that I work with and not make the same mistakes either.
Very smart, very smart. And I also love that passion of never being satisfied with the status quo. And why do you think entrepreneurs are that way?
I honestly think part of it is because they don't surround themselves with people who think that way. So, Gary Keller, founder of Keller Williams, has said you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. And I think that's so true. And so if you're hanging out with people who, are okay with where they're at, you're going to likely be okay with where you're at. And, it's interesting. A very good friend of mine, a relationship I had for a long, long time, started asking me some questions about how we were living our lives and the choices that we were making. And I started to realize that their thinking was different than my thinking. And it wasn't right or wrong, bad or good. It was just different. And I realized that if I spent a lot of time or stayed a lot of time in that environment, I was going to stay where they were at and not really where I wanted to go. So I think in part, that's why people have that limited thinking. I think the second thing is most people don't know and understand how their brain works. And, this is, Tim, something that you've studied, and you're a master at understanding and helping people, but our brains limit us. And that's because of our experiences that we've had over our lives. And so I think the second biggest thing is people's experiences, they put themselves in a box and they don't get out of that box. They don't think that it can be different for them. And it absolutely, for anyone, can be different. In fact, we all have more potential. And, I have this saying that I share with people, that you can't see more potential in others if you don't see it in yourself. And you have to see that and understand you have more potential. Just a great little story around this is that my son, who's now 24 years old, he was in high school and he was diagnosed with a learning disability when he was in grade school. And so part of that diagnosis was he always had an individualized learning plan and a tutor. And so when he got to high school, we realized that he needed a tutor because A, the subjects of today, I wasn't ready to teach, nor was my wife ready to teach him. Sure. And B, I wouldn't be the best at doing it. And so we hired him a tutor, and he was being average, and I knew he had more potential. So one day at the end of his sophomore year, his tutor comes to me and says, Pat, I think you're being too hard on your son. Now, I don't know about you, Tim, but raising kids, when somebody tells me I'm being too hard on my son, immediately I took a step back and had to take a breath. And I said, I said, Bob, not the tutor's name, we'll just leave it and say Bob. I said, Bob, let me ask you a question. Why are you saying that? He says, well, he's really doing the best that he can. And this one question changed my son's life. And it also, I think, changed the tutor's life. I said, Bob, let me ask you a question. Is he doing the best that can be done?
Ooh.
And see, Tim, the answer to that question.
No, I got chills.
He's not doing the best that can be done.
Oh my gosh, I got chills running up and down.
Well, listen to this. In his sophomore year, he was getting C's. So what I said to the tutor is I said, no, he's not doing the best that can be done. So unless you're willing to change your thinking, you have a choice today. You can either change your thinking or I'm going to fire you because you're limiting my son's opportunity in his future. His junior year, Tim, he got a B average. His senior year in a private, very tough school, he was just shy of an A average, the A honor roll.
Oh,
and I believe that one conversation changed the trajectory of my son's life and also changed the trajectory of that tutor's life. And I see that tutor, he lives in our neighborhood and we have a great relationship, but it was just that one question that changed the trajectory of everything around it. So, I think it's people believe in that they don't have that potential. And sometimes you need somebody else to believe in that potential. Last thing I'll say is that I always say to people, if you don't believe in your own potential, borrow some of my belief in your potential, because I believe people have more potential. And I believe one of the gifts that I was given was to help people extract that potential.
Mm. Wow. There was so much wisdom in what you just shared, Pat, that I can't even recap it. I mean, that was brilliant.
If you let me go, there's a lot inside of here that'll come out. So
oh, you go, brother. I'm just going to keep setting you up and you go. So that's incredible. I mean, it's really good. So a mutual friend of ours, Dan Young, is the person who introduced us. And we both really think he's an amazing guy. Oh, and so, and his wife as well, Erica. And so one of the things that he told me, he says, Pat is so good at asking questions. He said, I really like Jack Canfield and his ability to ask questions, but I think Pat does an even better job. And I thought that was a really great compliment. And after listening to you for a few minutes, I'm agreeing. You know, I mean, that question gave me chills. And really, the quality of your life is being determined by the quality of the questions that you walk around asking yourself all day long. So that kind of sets us up for the next question I had. You know, you are very skilled at helping people to see their own potential and to help them blast through those glass ceilings that we have for ourselves that sometimes we don't even know is there. So you're doing this through asking questions. What are some of the most common self-limiting beliefs that you find people struggle with that keep them stuck?
Wow. So I think, you know, first, people have limiting beliefs based upon their childhood, based upon their parents, based upon their experience of their parents. I think that first and foremost, that's where a lot of, if you really unpeel a lot of people's experiences, I call it unpeeling the onion. If you really unpeel it, you get back to a lot of things early on in their life. You, Tim, you know this. Most of our brain thoughts and the things we experience are formulated in the childhood years, high school years. And really, there's a lot of research somewhere between 18, 22, 23, somewhere in there. And most research is about after the age of 21, 22. You're pretty set on your beliefs and your thoughts in the environment that you were in. So because of that, because you're set on it, those beliefs and those experiences also impact how you think moving forward. So it's then the people that they surround themselves with after that. It's the things that they take in. It's the, you know, how are they challenged? What type of experiences did they have in their business? And you know, all of a sudden we have these stories, and whether they're our stories or somebody else's stories, and those stories are what we always go back to. That's our subconscious. And that's where those limiting beliefs come from. The second big thing is we don't create a vision. So even if somebody has those limiting beliefs, that doesn't mean they have to live there or stay there. And so many people don't ever take the time to future vision where they want to go and what they want to do and who they want to become. And so what happens is they get stuck. They don't see another option. And so that's limiting beliefs. And then the third thing I think is, you know, and even today, without getting, you know, political, is there's a society, an environment where, you know, if you're successful, you're judged. And I think that holds a lot of people back. Because they think, well, if I become successful, then I'm going to be judged, or I'm going to, you know, get corrupt, or I'm not going to be powerful. And so what happens is they just go, I don't want to do that. And yes, there are some people that when they become successful, become challenging. You know, the Bernie Madoffs of the world, that's a bad deal. But that's a bad person. That wasn't somebody who was a successful entrepreneur who looked out for people. That was just somebody who was just bad. Let's be real. But yet people see that and they go, well, I don't want to turn into that individual if I'm successful. Well, that's a choice. He made choices. And I think we all have choices with, you know, and knowing that none of us are perfect. So I think a lot of it is just the limiting beliefs of what people have experienced in their life. And they relive those experiences, as you know.
Yeah. That's really good. You really mapped it out, you know, so we start out with our past and the experiences that we have growing up. And then those experiences become the stories that we tell ourselves, you know, about why we can or cannot accomplish things. And then often people don't have a vision, which I have found through my coaching people all these years, is that we're so focused on what we don't want or what we don't have or what we're unhappy about that when I say, well, what do you want? People get real quiet.
Right.
And they just start telling me more about what they don't want and what they're unhappy about. They haven't really created the vision for what their ideal life or their ideal business would look like and be like. And then you're right. The fears of judgment, the fear of abandonment, the fear of success, the fear of failure, all those other fears, but all those fears come back to the story that we have and this idea that we don't have any control over what's going to happen. Yeah. And you and I are telling people that it's internal. You do have control. It's about your beliefs. It's about what you believe and the stories that you tell yourself, and you can change those. You have the ability to change that.
And Tim, there's one other thing, and it goes to right what you just said. And so I always, the stories that we tell ourselves in many cases are not true stories, yet we believe they're true stories. Yeah. So the other thing that I would add that I didn't add was having somebody around you that has the ability to ask you powerful questions to change the perspective of that story. See, your perception of a story doesn't make it right, or wrong, bad, or good. It just is. But usually the story that you're telling yourself is not based upon fact or logic. It's based upon emotion. And until you can actually see that from a different perspective, you likely won't change it. So, you mentioned Dan, and I so love Dan, and I so appreciate his acknowledgement. And by the way, the comparison's interesting because one of the people that I follow is Jack Canfield. I love what Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen have done in their journey. And by the way, they're two entirely different people, and yet they bring two entirely different perspectives to the table. Yes. But it's about the questions. It's about how you can get your brain and somebody else's brain to think differently. And it's just that's how you change the story. Because when you ask somebody, so, hypothetically, the story that you have, where did that come from? And then they'll tell you where it came from. And usually where it came from was not anything they experienced. It was either something that somebody else experienced or some comment that somebody else made to them. And now all of a sudden they take that and they create a story around it that's not true, yet they've started believing it's true. And you know this, Tim, how the brain works is as soon as you tell the brain to look for something, it starts looking for it and it validates it. Whether you realize it or not, it validates it. And therefore, then the story gets reinforced and things happen and you tie dots to it. You connect dots, if you may. And that's why you need somebody. We all need somebody around us to ask us different questions, to put the mirror up and show us different things that we're not seeing so we can have some different thoughts. And then once we have the different thoughts, now we get to make some different decisions. We still may make the same decisions. Let's be real. When you know this over the years, when you work with people and you put things in front of them and they go, oh yeah, I see that. I see it. Oh my gosh, it's a breakthrough. And then as soon as you're done and you walk away, they go right back to where they were. That's because they're not, the next point is I got to make a decision to change. I have to have a desire to change. I have to have a big enough why to change. And that's the next piece of it. But sometimes even if you get there, there's still a struggle for people to make that change.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that's because there's a deeper belief underneath. Information doesn't change behavior. Upgrading a belief, telling yourself the new story, having people challenge you, and then taking what you've learned and put it into action so that you get new experiences, a new reinforcing story that allows you to show up in the way that you want to. So again, excellent observations, Pat. You really are stressing the importance of having people in your life who will tell you the truth, who will question you, who will give you feedback, who will be honest. A lot of times you ask your friends, or you ask someone in your company for advice, they tell you what they think you want to hear, or they'll go, oh yeah, that's too bad, or they'll validate the story because they're walking around with the same story as well. And what makes you so good at what you do is that you're willing to ask questions that cause people to stop and have to think and have to really challenge some of what they believe is obvious information when it's not reality. It's just their subjective interpretation of reality.
Well, in Tim, it's funny because it's almost like a gift and then a curse. And what I mean by that, is I have a belief that, and this is just my belief, it doesn't have to be yours or anybody else's or anybody else listening, but I have a belief that we were all given gifts when we were brought to this earth. And I have a belief in a source and a God, and people have their beliefs as well. But I believe that at the end of my life, I'm going to be asked questions. And one of the questions I have a belief that I'm going to be asked is, I gave you certain gifts, Mr. Mancuso. I gave you certain gifts that I might not have given others. I gave them gifts, but I gave you different gifts. Did you actually take those gifts and utilize them to the highest level to impact others around you, which is why I gave you those gifts? And because I have that belief, I sat down, it was part of the organization in my previous life, if you may, which was up until about a year ago, is I was part of leading a group of coaches, 55 coaches, and I've had the opportunity to coach some amazing people over the year. And I happened to be sitting down at an event next to somebody that I've coached in my journey, and an amazing individual. And I sat down next to him, and his wife was there, and I looked at him and I said, so, how's your business going? And he looked at me and he responded, he said, oh, it's going good. Now, I've been around this individual enough and, talked with him probably 1,000 times in our relationship. And I knew that was not a solid answer. I knew his commitment to the answer based upon his tonality, his language. And I said, okay, Bob, I said, come on, I'm just going to challenge you. 45 minutes later, we got done talking. It was like a mini coaching session. And he looks at me and he said, true story, and I'll be able to paraphrase. He said, Pat, I didn't want you to sit down next to me to give me a coaching session. And yet what happened is I knew that he was in some pain. I knew that there were some challenges. And that was, if I would have walked away from that conversation, not having that conversation with him, I would have felt a responsibility. Like I let somebody down.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, as a coach and as a consultant, I have a responsibility to not leave anything on the table. In other words, I got to put it all out there. I got to do whatever is necessary to help somebody, someone, an organization change the way they're thinking to take advantage of the opportunities and maximize their opportunities. Otherwise, frankly, I should get off the field. It's kind of like a pitcher going out there and pitching, and he decides today he's not going to throw his best stuff. He shouldn't be on the field. He should get off the field because he's impacting everybody around him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. I mean, I agree. I was laughing because I remember, when you're who you are and you just wear one hat everywhere you go, you walk around kind of like a coach. You're not even trying to be, but you'll hear people use words, or there's a suggestion in there that they have, or you recognize a belief or a blind spot, and you can't help but kind of point it out, right? And at one point, my wife said, "You're not allowed to talk to the neighbors anymore."
Yeah, my wife tells me I can't talk politics with anyone, so yes, I get it. I understand.
So that's great. All right. So since we're talking about CEO secrets, what were some of the ways that you built a culture for your organizations that attracted over 800 people to you? I mean, that's so impressive. And so what were some of the things that you did as a CEO to create that kind of culture?
Well, first, and I have to give credit where credit is due, is that we decided to tag on to a model at Keller Williams that was really set us up for success. And, in our journey, just so people have some perspective, when we launched our first franchise in the state of Minnesota, and it was the first franchise in the 6-state region, at that time, there were 11,000 agents in the Keller Williams organization. And so it was really like a Keller who. In fact, we were confused with the paint company of Shurr Williams in our market. We had two very large brokers we competed with. And so, they said it wouldn't work. They said it wouldn't last. But we had a great model, number one. Number two is we created a vision. So we had a vision to grow not just as a real estate organization. We had a vision to grow as a company that provided ancillary services to our customers, that worked with our agents and gave them additional opportunities. So it was the vision that we had. the second. Number three, it was really the culture. And the culture was adopted from much of what Keller Williams had. And that culture starts with God, family, business. And it was a belief, and the company has been said, Keller Williams is a cult, and it's not. It's just an organization that's based upon beliefs. We have certain beliefs. You don't have to believe in it or not. And when I say we, I'm still a part of Keller Williams, and I'll probably be a part of Keller Williams for my entire life. And yet I worked with them and a part of their organization. I'm still part of their international master faculty. And yet I moved away from what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And now, for about the last year and a half, I've been back to my roots, which was what I really enjoy doing. And that's impacting CEOs and organizations. So, we had a vision and we had a great model. We built a culture. And then we really started to attract great people. And one of the opportunities, I think, for me that's helped in the consulting and growth of organizations is that inside of Keller Williams, we adopted a model. And that model was a proprietary model that helped Keller Williams organization grow from basically a company that wasn't known outside of Texas to the largest real estate company in the world. And for a long time, that model was used to hire, to grow, to train, to lead, to manage, to motivate. And as soon as I got the opportunity to get super engaged in that model, I realized that how you grow great organizations is that first you understand the behavior of the organization. And that behavior starts with the CEO. And most small to medium-sized companies, the CEOs were the entrepreneurs who started the company. And as that company has grown, it doesn't make it right or wrong or bad or good. In some aspects, the CEO really isn't the right person to be leading the organization. In some aspects, the CEO doesn't even like to do what they do. And many organizations don't have a model for hiring, for leading, for coaching, for training. So just a very simple example of this is you and I know that we have behavioral strengths. We know things that we really enjoy doing. An example I always share with CEOs is that when I started in high school, this even started, I became involved in business program and I loved accounting and I was the business student of the year in our high school. And then I went on to college and, for much of my college career, I wanted to be an accountant. That was my deal. I'm going to be a CPA. Well, I didn't really understand like what CPAs did for a lot of aspects. Mm-hmm. And I love numbers. I love financials. I can turn financials upside, downside. I understand balance sheets. I can coach people on balance sheets. But being an accountant, if you look at my core behavior, was not what I wanted to do. Right. So what I quickly realized when I started becoming familiar with behavioral assessments and personality assessments, there is a difference. And I realized that organizations, the reason they struggle, but if you look, and Tim, and you know this, when you unpeel issues within an organization, they all end up going back to people. Mm-hmm. Right people, wrong role. Wrong role, great people. Wrong people, wrong role. They all go back. Look at every issue within an organization. Think about Blockbuster, okay? Why isn't Blockbuster here anymore? In reality, they're not here because there weren't people in the organization that felt comfortable telling the people in the organization that they weren't watching what was going on, that they weren't seeing what was going on, that they shouldn't make different decisions. Because frankly, you had to be blind to not see what was happening in that organization. Now, that's my perspective. But what I'm saying is this. When the organization has a model to understand how people behave, how they communicate, they have a model to train, that's the other thing organizations struggle with. They hire people, they put them in their role, and they really don't set them up for success. And so that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years, both inside of Keller Williams and working with organizations outside of Keller Williams, is they've got to understand how and why they're hiring, who they're hiring, particularly for leadership roles, people who are leading others, because that's where it all starts. And so that's one of the biggest things I've learned.
Wow. That's really good. Yeah. That's really good. One of the things that really stood out that you said, Pat, was that a lot of times CEOs are not the right person to be, managing people, right? They're extraordinarily good at business. They're extraordinarily good at being able to divide and conquer, but maybe they rate lower on the empathy scale.
Right.
And so in those situations, their vision is to take care of their people, but they put people in place to do that because they know that's not their core strength. So if anybody's listening and that's not your core strength, then that's okay.
Yep.
You just put people in those positions that is their core strength, and then let them build the culture, because like you said, it always comes back to the people.
Yeah, there's an exercise that we do with organizations, and we'll take the CEO and we'll ask them to identify all the things they do on a daily basis, and we flip chart this. And so we'll write down everything they do on a daily basis. Then we'll ask them to circle the 5 things they do consistently on a daily basis. You know, what are they really doing? Then what we'll ask them to do is circle the 5 things they enjoy the most. Guess what? The circles very rarely are the same circles.
Yeah.
See, organizations grow. So what I was maybe doing when the organization was in their first, second, third, or fourth year, now in the 5th, 6th, 7th year, maybe that's just not where I need to be. And the ego has to get out of the way. It has to be about the organization. And that's what we really love doing. You know, I'll never forget this story. There was a company that we met with locally a number of years ago, a pretty successful company, Tim. They were in the pawn arena. So they built a highly successful business, very reputable in an industry that didn't have a great reputation, right? Mm-hmm. And I met with the CEO, and he spent a day with us in our conference room, and they can do that for free. And we basically undress them, I guess is the best way for me to say it is. And we talk about their life, their family, their business, and everything. And when we got done, we identified what was going to help that company become successful. And the CEO was with us, believed in everything. And right before they're ready to execute the agreement for us to come in, the CEO called me and he said, "Hey, Pat, I really want to do this with you, but I have somebody who's a friend of mine who's in the business and who's telling me something different that I need to do. And so I'm going to go down that path." Now, I knew the path that they were going to go down was not going to get them to where they went. Mm-hmm. About a year and a half later, they filed for bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just so interesting when you look at how organizations function, and they're not bad people. They just sometimes get bad advice, or they've got some really big blind spots. And so I just love working, and you know this too. You just love working with people who are open to change, that are willing to embrace something different. And then when they go do it, they come back and they're so grateful. They're so that's just the coolest thing, when you can see people make those transformations and organizations make those transformations.
Yeah, the gratitude is immense. People feel like you changed our lives, yeah. And so that's a very powerful story. Whenever somebody says, "I got a friend in the business," I'm like, oh boy, yeah. You better tread lightly, Yeah. So it's a very important story, and I'm glad that you shared it.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't shocking for me, but it was shocking to the public how quickly that company went sideways. This was a very visible company. This was a company that spent a ton of money locally on advertising. And the CEO was the face of that company. And it was just, it was eye-opening, to be honest with you. It was just eye-opening.
Well, it was a learning for that CEO. For whatever Absolutely. Reason, that person, we'll call him Bob.
Yeah, Bob. There you go, Bob.
Bob needed that awakening for whatever reason.
Yep.
And we all have those. So very powerful. So are there any other mistakes that you're seeing CEOs making these days, particularly around COVID?
Oh, yeah. Boy, what an interesting time to be CEO around COVID, right?
Right. Yeah.
Here's the thing I think that is very challenging, and I don't know that we still have the answers yet. So I've got an organization that we're working with. It's a very small organization, co-founders. They're about a $2 million company right now, gross revenue, and highly profitable. The whole remote versus in-person environment for hiring their technology company. So there is some opportunities for remote, but that whole challenge right now And, what are the upsides to remote? What are the downsides? If I am somebody who is working for an organization, I've been blessed that I've never had to do this. But if I was working for an organization and I was previously driving an hour each way to go to work, and I had the opportunity to now go remote, I'm telling you, I would be the first in line to do that based upon the experiences of driving, right? I mean, it's just logical. Yeah. Yet what we don't know is we don't know the downside to that. We don't know they're starting to study it, and they're starting to see the inefficiencies of it, where the productivity has gone down, and it's just natural because you're not in the same environment. For me, and I don't know if this was true for you during COVID, we were shut down as an area, and I have commercial office space, and our commercial office space was shut down to the public. But if we chose to still come in, we could. And I had a home office, and I'm telling you, there was no way that I could do my business in the home office like we did during COVID. So I think, Tim, that's a big challenge right now. I think the other challenge for CEOs is just, the leadership and the environment of how do we bring that culture together, all the stuff that's going on, and in addressing, just the environment that we're in. And it's crazy, right? I mean, it's just crazy. And I say crazy from a good perspective. I think we always need to be questioning, are we doing the best that we can? Are we treating people fairly? Are we providing people opportunities? And so just that whole deal, I think, is challenging. And then the third thing is, what are the business models that are going to evolve into the future? One of my backgrounds my background is real estate, and that environment is totally changing. There's so much financial money coming into the industry, chasing the transaction, if you may, chasing the customer. And so it's, can you evolve? Can you look at what things are going to be down the road? And so there's a lot of challenges. And yet, here's the thing, there's always a lot of challenges. They're just different challenges. So who's in your organization? How do they think? Are they in the right opportunities to think? Are you providing them the culture to be able to speak, to be able to challenge? The biggest thing, I think, the blind spots for organizations is people don't feel like they can challenge the CEO, that they can, respectfully, by the way. And so I think if you don't have an organization like that and you don't foster that, that's a blind spot that's going to probably cost you a lot of money. So for me, that's what we do is open the CEO's eyes to looking at their businesses differently. And we really challenge them. I mean, the CEO is a CEO. And for me, that's just a human being that has a title, because we all are human beings. And so we really challenge the thinking of the CEOs. And I just love that, because they're like, they come in sometimes with ego and they walk out with no ego, because they understand that's not going to benefit them.
Yeah. Yeah. The ego is just that emotional armor that we put up, often because we think that to not have that somehow would show vulnerability, and so a lot of limiting beliefs that people have. But again, more sage wisdom just pouring out of you, Pat. I mean, that's really, really great. I talk to a lot of people all the time, employees of companies that I'm working with, and and that's what they're saying, that there needs to be some kind of hybrid model, because people love not having to drive. Someone was telling me just the other day, he says, it would take me a half hour to drive to work. He says, I'm actually working more. I've had to figure out how to put boundaries in my life, because I can just walk over to my computer and start working. He said, before I have to get up, I have to shower, I got to get dressed, I got to get to the car, I got to go get coffee, I got to get to the office. He says, now I get up and I walk right over to my computer and I start working. Yeah. And so he said, in many ways, I'm working harder now than I did when I was at the office. But when you say, what do you miss? People always say, my colleagues, the other people. And so you're right, that camaraderie. And plus, when you're at home, you have a lot of distractions.
Yeah. And Tim, you know this in all of your studies, we need social interaction.
We do. Yeah.
And over Zoom doesn't do it. I mean, I'm sorry, it just doesn't do it.
It's not the same.
Yeah. And I think, one other thing I would add to it that I just thought about is, we also have an environment where I think a lot of people are reevaluating, what do they want their careers to look like? Like we've always been, I think there's been the society thing where you got to get an 8-to-5 job, you got to go to college, you got to get with a corporation. And boy, that's just not the deal anymore. When you look at the numbers of people opening up their own businesses and starting their own businesses or going into a contract relationship, I mean, that also is turning a lot of things upside down, where people are just going, no, I don't need that anymore. I think I can do it differently, and I think I can have more enjoyment. I mean, I think that's the one thing for COVID that it has brought out, is people thinking about their lives and their businesses and their careers differently. And I think there's a lot of great that's come out of that. There's some other challenges with it, of course, but I think there's a lot of great that's come out of it.
Yeah, I agree. From all the interviews, there is a theme that backs up what you're saying, and that is to have conversations with your people to find out where they're at and what they are thinking, and not make all these assumptions that we know what people are thinking. If you want to know what's going to add to their value and their quality of life, then ask them. There was a book called Dream Manager. And it was all about just, sitting down and finding out, and you're a master at this, Pat, finding out what people, what their dreams are, what their visions are. And from that, companies have done all kinds of things. They found that some people didn't have kids, but they love their pets. They love their fur babies. And so they offered pet insurance, supplemental pet insurance to take care of their pets, and other kids were like, I'm working to put my kid through college. So they started doing seed money for college funds, and they found out that stuff because they were having conversations and figuring out, how can I improve the quality of your life while you're working here?
Yeah, that book, if people haven't read that book, Matthew Kelly is the author. It's an amazing book. And one of the profiles in that book was the commercial cleaning industry and how they brought that concept into the organization and reduced the turnover in the industry from almost 80% down to low teens. And it's just such it's a great model for relationships within organizations.
Yes, absolutely. So, I wanted to ask you, since you are kind of a real estate guru, where do you think the industry is going over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, Tim, we weren't going to talk politics, right? So I'll have to keep my answer outside of politics. Okay. It's a question that I've been in real estate since 1987. I actively sold starting in 1990. Here's the response all the time. Okay. I have no clue where the market's going. If you do,
oh, that's an honest answer right there.
Please let me know, because I have no clue.
Oh, that's so honest.
I would always say that, kind of fun. And then I would say, well, first, here's what we do know, okay? Because this is true. Yeah. Markets go up, markets go down. Markets have cycles. Right now, we are in the longest upcycle in real estate ever. That cycle at some point will change. We're starting to see some little changes in it in many markets in the country. Now, what does a little change look like? Well, prices are still going up, but the percentage of price increase is slowing down. Other changes that impact the market are interest rate environment. Interest rates recently came down. I'm not sure they can continue to stay down without artificially being impacted. And, that's a whole nother conversation as to, when some of the artificial things that are happening in the economy are done, what does that look like? You've got home affordability right now in some markets in the country. For example, like California, the average home price is $800,000. Well, that $800,000 for average home affordability, that's crazy. Like, there's people who just frankly don't make enough money. And even if they combine 4 people making money, aren't going to be able to afford that. So, what I always say to people is, here's what I say. And I've always said it, and I'll continue to say it. I know what I know today, which means it's the best time to buy or sell, because it really is the best time to buy or sell. Now, if you buy and home prices go down, here's what I also know. Go back to 2008. If you look at a graph, home prices in 2007, 2008 plummeted. They are now back above where they were in 2007 and 2000, prior to the financial collapse in 2007, 2008. So unlike a stock that sometimes goes to zero, real estate never goes to zero. And so it's always a good time. It's always a good time to buy, always a good time to sell. Here's the other thing that I would say. It absolutely is an amazing time to invest. If people are not looking at investing and taking some of the equity they may have in their home right now, or some of the equity they may have on the sidelines, real estate is, if you look at people who are highly successful over history of time, about 98% of them had real estate as part of their wealth portfolio. It absolutely is a wealth builder. So Tim, my response is, today is a great time to buy. It's a great time to sell. And I know what I know today, and I don't know what I'm going to know tomorrow, because that's the part about real estate. It's unpredictable tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, again, very sound, practical advice. So, Pat, this has been absolutely mesmerizing. I knew that you were going to over deliver, and you have. So how can people learn more about your services?
Yeah, they can go to www.patmancuso.com, PATMANCUSO.com. We have all of our services there. We do a number of things as part of our organization. And I love the variety of what we do. We help companies implement the proprietary hiring process that we have. We do coaching with certain select clients. We don't take on everybody. We really, really want to have a great relationship. We also do tax credit recovery. And for people who all own small to medium-sized businesses right now, one of the things that has been out there for about a year now that's one of the misunderstood is the employee retention tax credit. And we're finding companies are being told by their CPAs that they don't qualify because they got PPP, and that's a myth. And so if you're a small to medium-sized company and you have had a setback because of COVID, and even if you didn't take a step back because of COVID, please come to our website. We've got information there, and we can certainly help you around that. So we get to do a lot of great things, Tim. And we have our podcast, which is the Passion Project. So we love that as well.
Outstanding. Such great advice all the way to the end with that 6 to 7 figure tip that you just offered about the tax savings. So absolutely. Pat, you are a gem. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your audience. Thank you.
Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief or high stress or procrastination or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to PowerMindsetProgram.com. That's PowerMindsetProgram.com and grab your copy today.